Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's live Q&A. Our first question comes from Miguel, a partner in a Melbourne property law firm of about 15 people. And Miguel has asked, I'm speaking at a property law conference next month, and I've just received the standard speaker info request. Most speakers just send the basics, but I feel like this is a wasted opportunity, which I agree with. This is the biggest gathering in our industry and includes many potential clients. Beyond just submitting what they've asked for, what should I be doing before, during, and after to actually generate some real business opportunities from this? Well, thank you for the question, Miguel. It's a really good question. I think all of this advice around how do you make the most out of a speaking opportunity is it's going to require that you have some sort of offer or some sort of asset that you want people to know about. So it could be like something specific to the market that they might find interesting, say like a thought leadership piece or a white paper or a podcast, really something that you can direct people to. Or it might be like a sort of a discrete service offering, say like a review of their contracts, or it could be a training session for their team. And what I'd suggest is when you're providing that information to give to the organisers pre-conference, so in the lead up to the conference, you want to include they're going to ask for a few things, and one of them is going to be the bio. So you're going to give a bio, probably about 100 words or so. And I think it's a wasted opportunity if you don't include some sort of reference to that kind of offer or that kind of asset. So in that 100 words, you want to actually have a bit of information about, obviously, your background, the type of law that you work in, the type of clients that you work with, but it also include a reference to something specific that you want them to go and have a look at. So that article, the white paper, the podcast, the training session, whatever it might be. And a training session is a really good one to begin with because it's fairly low commitment at your end. So you want to be kind of like bringing up that training conference in your marketing materials leading up to that conference, if that's part of your offer. So they're also going to ask for a headshot, maybe a logo, that type of thing. On the day, when someone will probably introduce you. So it'll be either the host of the conference or a sponsor. And you want to ensure that they mention that offer or asset in your bio. It's likely that they will. It'll likely be that they just get that bio from whatever you supply to them. But you just want to make sure that that is going to be in there and they're going to read that out. You also want to think of like that offer or asset in a way that you can kind of place it naturally into your presentation. So like a TV equivalent, we'd talk about like product placement. You want to think about, can you sort of weave it into the presentation if possible? Obviously, you don't want to do that in too much of a salesy kind of way, but if you can do it kind of in a natural way, that'd be really advantageous. And lastly, on the day, when you're closing up your presentation, you should list all the ways that they can find you and obviously have that link to that offer or asset. One of the best things I've found that's worked for, at least for me when I'm presenting, is just put your email address up on the screen and ask them to email you directly for more information. I generally find it's all a bit overwhelming at a conference. You know, lots of links, LinkedIn, or it might be YouTube, it might be Twitter, it might be a link to your website. There's lots of things that people could do, but I think if you ask them just to send you an email directly for some more information, I think that's a really good way of starting the conversation and getting the most out of the conference. In terms of just general advice on how to get more out of the conference, I spoke about this a few weeks ago about someone going to an interconference. I think all of the advice I gave on that still holds true. The first being, get that list of people who are attending the conference. It used to be reserved for speakers, but usually with conference apps and so forth, you get a list, everyone will get a list beforehand. So you want to set up those meetings beforehand. There's plenty of opportunities sort of around breakfast or lunch or the coffee breaks. You want to reach out to those people to meet with them at breakfast or lunch or coffee break beforehand. If you can organize those meetings beforehand, that's where you're going to get the most bang for buck. It's in those one-to-one conversations rather than those sort of like networking opportunities. If possible, have something physical that you can hand to them. It could be as simple as a business card, but you want it to have some details of the offer or the asset that we were just talking about. And I think lastly, the follow-up from a conference is kind of like the whole thing. Like if you don't do the follow-up, nothing really happens. And I think, so I'd say follow-up is absolutely key. But my advice would be you want to do it once everyone's had a chance to get home and had like a day or two to catch up on things. So it doesn't need to be while you're at the conference. It doesn't need to be like right as, the day after the conference. You could give it 2 or 3 days. It just gives people a chance to sort of catch up on all their work, and you're more likely to get a positive response from it. I have a question here from Mei Ling, who's a partner at a Bangkok firm, and she has asked, our firm name changed last year after a merger, but we still have clients calling us by the old name. Our rebrand doesn't seem to have stuck. What practical steps can we take to reinforce our new identity without annoying our clients? Thank you for the question, Mei Ling. So the first thing I would say is just about expectations. So you want to give it about 12 months or so for a rebrand to stick, especially a renaming. It doesn't tend to happen overnight. People kind of have that habit of calling you from your old firm. It's just human nature. So I'd say first, just give it about 12 months to stick. So if it's still in that first 12 months, I think just be patient. Secondly, I'd ask, is the new name hard to say? So if it's one word, it's going to be straightforward. If it's 2 words, you might find if they're a long 2 words, people might still continue to refer to it by just the first name or maybe like initials. So it might be like AB Law. Once it gets into three or four or even more names, people will naturally just shorten it. I've written an article on our website. You can check that out, and I'll include it in the show notes. But people are naturally going to shorten to longer names. So if it is long, and that's part of the issue, you might want to consider coming up with a shortened version that's going to make sense for the merged firm. So you might almost dictate what your nickname is going to be, if you want to call it that. Moving on from expectations, I want to talk a bit about like having your own house in order. So I hope this would go without saying, but having obviously all your digital and physical assets in order, so your website, your Google business profile, the office signage, there's a whole list of things that are going to need to be updated, just making sure that they're updated. But secondly, it's probably like more of a behavioral thing, and that's, are your team using the new name? And having been through a few mergers myself in law firms, I know it can often like feel unnatural to begin with in using that merged name. It just doesn't like roll off the tongue as naturally. So you want to sort of check to see that the team members are actually using the new name. I'd say like a really specific example of that would be how the team answers the phone, and in particular, the reception. I remember working with a firm. I was based in Melbourne. The firm also had a Sydney office, and I was visiting them, and I came up the lift, and as soon as the lift door opened, the receptionist answered the phone, and the example was the original firm was 3 names. So they had to say all 3 names. And then they said incorporating the practice of, and that other firm had 2 names. So it took about 10 seconds just to mention the firm name. And I think you want to catch that as early as possible. No one is ever going to remember that kind of whole thing. So you want to, as I said before, if you can shorten it, that is going to really help. and then make sure that the team is just consistently using that new name. And finally, you asked about how to raise that with clients and referrers, or with clients without kind of pestering them. And my advice on that would be is approach it like in a really light-hearted way, and you might even be a little bit self-deprecating. I wouldn't take it personally. I'd say it's like, appreciate that people aren't doing this to annoy the firm. It's just their habit. It's just what they have used to being calling the firm. So, as I said, try it in a lighthearted way. Some ideas I had about how you might want to do that is just have some like high quality merch with the new name on it, and sort of make light of it when you hand it to them. You might say something like, that's the firm formerly known as, but our new name is this, and here's a little gift to remind you. You might say, like, if it is in your personality and you want to have a bit of a joke, you might even say, oh, that's our maiden name. We tied the knot with that firm a few months back. This is our new name. Or something I used to suggest to partners is you could just blame the higher ups or the marketing team that they've asked you to correct it. So kind of you're not pulling them up on it. You've been asked by someone else to pull you up on it. As I said, give it 12 months to stick. I think repetition is really important in sort of changing this habit. And so you need to get those reps in. And if your team can be consistent with it, you're going to get there, as long as that new name isn't a complete mouthful. We have a question here from SA, who's a practice manager of a small firm in Hobart. And their question is, we've got 5 testimonials on our website that have been there for years. Half of those clients aren't even active anymore. Should we be regularly updating these, and how often is reasonable? Thank you for the question. There's an ideal answer to this, and then there's a realistic one. And the ideal answer is you're updating these as they happen, like every week or month. But that's not very realistic for most law firms. Busy is it at the top of the priority list? So I thought, let's have a look at something that's a bit more realistic. So you mentioned sort of some of them are outdated, and I think first you just need to use your judgment on whether it makes sense to keep those old testimonials on the site or whether you should remove them. So perhaps a good filter might be, well, is the testimonial from a type of client that you still want to attract and work with today? Like, is that type of client an ideal? If you're working with businesses, I'd say that's more of a significant priority. Like, if think about the size of the company that's left the testimonial, the role in the company, the industry, does that kind of match the type of clients that you're trying to attract today? If so, I think you could leave it there. I'd also consider, this might sound funny, but consider the age of the person. So if that person is now retired, or if they're passed away, it might be time, obviously, to refresh them. People may go and Google that testimonial's name. So you want to make sure that that person is still with the business, and that's an active company. I'd also think about removing the testimonial if there's something in the content that, say, hasn't aged well. So it might be like a reference to something that was topical at the time but is no longer particularly relevant. And if that's the case, you'd want to remove them too. But I thought I'd just share also some tips for getting new testimonials and how often you could do that. I think with testimonials, in particular, as a marketing thing to do, I think having a process for getting them, a process or a system for getting them, is really helpful. And I actually think that might be a good topic for me to cover in a future webinar. But for the sake of getting this rolling, I think it's really important that the first thing you do is consider the timing and the context of the request. There's absolutely no right or wrong answer or one size fits all scenario for this timing and context. I would generally advise our clients not to send the testimonial request at the same time as sending an invoice, but I have seen examples of that working in a few different practices, but I generally advise against it. I don't think it's the right time. For higher value matters, I would say schedule a debrief or a follow-up call. So you could ask them then. For something that's like been maybe it's a few months, like a big matter, a trial, whatever it might be, scheduling in a debrief or a follow-up call is a really good idea to do anyway. You could ask them then. For the more day-to-day kind of requests, I would recommend creating an email template that the relationship partner can send to people after the matter. And you want that message to be able to be personalized. So it shouldn't be this completely cookie cutter. It should be sent from Outlook. But what we're trying to do is increase the likelihood of that email being open. So we want it to come from the relationship partner and we want it to be from Outlook. But some of it can be templated, the content of that email. And I think the relationship partner should be selecting who they send these to. And I think it goes without saying, I don't think this is something that should be automated. In that email, what I'd suggest doing is including a link that leads people to a short form. And on that form, the first question, it needs to be a quantitative type of, it needs to have a quantitative type of answer. So that might be something like a 1 to 10 scale, which would be like the net promoter score, or it could be a high, medium, low, or a excellent, great, average, poor. Whatever it is, you need to have it like set up so it's going to be a decision tree, because that's going to influence what questions you ask next. So for high scores, it should ask them for like maybe a 1 to 3 sentence review or testimonial. Once they've completed that, and assuming obviously this is part of the high score section, you could ask them if they'd be able to post that review on Google. Then to answer the question about how do you get more testimonials on the website or how do you update them, simply have a checkbox there that says, can we use this review or testimonial on our website and marketing materials? And then a follow-up question that just asks them, are they happy to use their name and any other details like identification details, or do they want some level of anonymization? So pretty simple thing. It's going to be like a 3 or 4 question kind of review, very simple form. What you want to have in that decision tree is for the lower scores, you want them to basically have another list of questions. And it's not going to ask them to put things on Google and so forth. But I think for the lower scores, which shouldn't happen very often because you're handpicking them, you're sending these manually, but you could ask them about what went wrong. You could ask them, would they like the relationship partner or say someone else senior in the team to follow up with them to try and make it right, if it makes sense to do so. And that's a really good way of just making sure that the client who might not be so happy just is feeling heard. As a closing note on testimonials, you can incentivize team members to ask for reviews and testimonials. I've seen that work really, really well in law firms. So you could offer staff a $100 gift voucher or a $200 gift voucher for every positive review. I have seen a couple of firms make testimonials and reviews part of their performance metrics. But I think personally, I just really like the incentivizing team members to go and ask for reviews. I would say that it doesn't need a lot, but I do think it needs some training. So it's not going to be on how to use the system. The system should be pretty straightforward. It's just send them a link to a form. But I think the challenge for a lot of lawyers is having the confidence to ask their clients and when the right time to do so is. So I'd really think about how do you actually communicate that to the lawyers if you're going to roll out an incentivization program.